This is Elected, a podcast for women in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara, and this week my guest is Renee Merrifield. In the spirit of reconciliation, it's important to me on my personal journey to acknowledge and share that I am personally and professionally committed to learning myself and teaching and sharing with others the history of colonialism and the ongoing systemic violence against Indigenous peoples, and to help in whatever way I can to dismantle that. The land on which I live and work is the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Pawnee, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and Métis Nation 3. So today, Renee, thank you for joining me on Elected. It's a pleasure to have you. So I'll share your bio just to start, so in case anyone isn't familiar with you, but I think the chances of that are being very low. But so you were elected first elected as MLA for Kelowna-Mission in 2020. You previously served as the official opposition critic for health. You're a dedicated public leader who has effectively led with results in your community, province, and nation for the last 20 years. You're committed to strong, effective advocacy for your community, bringing forward all the elements that aid in making Kelowna-Mission a great place to live, work, and play. You are a devoted mother of five in a blended household. You're an entrepreneur, a successful business owner. You have a staff of over 50 people in the local construction industry. You're a person of faith. And you're a compassionate individual who cares about others. You're committed to giving back. And you are also environmentally conscious, believing in sustainability for future generations, which makes sense if you're in construction and you're also a mother. All of those things come into play. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we do have a connection through someone else. So do you want to share what that connection is?
Absolutely. So Steve Thompson, who I understand you worked for many years, we share an equal admiration for. I think the comment that I used was he's one of the good ones.
And I said he's one of the best.
And then you said he's one of the best. And I have full agreement. So when I first was running, he jumped in with 2 feet. So even though he had a broken knee, literally, he was out Burma shaving. He was out calling people. He was a strong supporter all the way through the election. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, we were having a conversation on one of the last days before the election, and he brought over a Madame Premier bag that is the women's places, and then it had all of the different places in politics that we belong, and it was a welcome. It was, Renee, you're meant to be here, and it was very impactful, very powerful. So I thank you as well for everything that you do to really empower women and to change the narrative that a woman's place is somewhere different.
Yeah, it's everywhere that spaces weren't built for, that we've traditionally been excluded from very intentionally. And politics is definitely one of those spaces. But I mean, also we can talk about maybe your experiences as a woman in construction, because there's definitely a lack of representation there as well. But yeah, Steve is, he was the second minister I worked for when he was first elected. He became the Minister of Agriculture because he had such a lifelong experience in the BC agriculture industry with the BCAC, and it was a pleasure to work for him and to get to know him. And I told you he actually came. He was at my wedding with his wife and one of his most permanent constituency assistants, Nan. So the Kelowna-Mission team is like very, very close to my heart.
And Nan, who is she is a fierce woman. Wow, yes. She's awesome.
Yeah.
But she retired. She announced her retirement actually before the snap election, because she wanted to spend more time with her grandkids, etc. And you never guess her age. But she actually was Cindy Hawkins.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, CA way back when. So
Nan is amazing. And I stay in touch with another former constituency assistant, Rebecca, who I believe works for the city of West Kelowna now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they were a super tight team, and it was a pleasure working with them. Anyways, this is not the podcast where we only say nice things about Steve Thompson and Nan Pellet. It's really about you today. So
and say amazing things about you.
Oh, well, no, this is well, I appreciate that, but that makes me actually very uncomfortable. So let's just focus on you. So tell me, how has the leadership race, so you're running to be, you're not only the MLA currently for Kelowna-Mission, you're also running for the leadership of the BC Liberals. How has that experience been so far?
It's some parts of it were totally anticipated and have been awesome. Meeting people, hearing their stories. I always say that as an elected official, I feel like I'm given such trust with the story, and I feel like I have to hold it. So if you can see my hand motion, like you have to hold it really gently, and then use that to empower your voice and to empower policy and where you see things need to change, and be that amplification, right? So that part of it has been awesome. And the amount of correspondence that I get back and forth through emails and text messages, people reaching out, whether it's social media, etc. I've absolutely had a blast with all of that aspect. The politics suck. I wish you could do government just as a legislator, as a leader, without all of the political shenanigans. That part is hard. And I'm such a relationship oriented person. I'm such a person that has really been identified as, with my integrity and doing the right thing because it's the right thing, that politics can be quite disheartening sometimes in how things are done or dealt with, or how attacks are done, how personal things get. Yes, and I'll leave it at that for right now.
Yeah, I like to say that the thing that I like least about politics is the politics of the politics, because like the pure politics, the governing aspect and the policy making, and that's that's where people benefit. It's the politics of the politics of the politics that things get offside, go off track, and it becomes less about what you're doing and more about the individuals involved and how that can be, weaponized.
That's a great way to word it. It's, it's not dealing with the true intent. It's not dealing with the broad brushstrokes of policy. It's like, it's a weaponizing of, these 2-second snippets taken out of context, and that's a really difficult place. And especially because I jumped in, as an MLA, and really jumped in with 2 feet, said, I'm just going to, throw myself into this. I was drinking from a fire hose, trying not to drown. And then when I got, when I became the health critic, it was like holding back a freight train in flip-flops and sand. And, but I did so with glee. Like I actually loved it. I thought, I can support my caucus. I can support the people of British Columbia. I felt a huge calling to that end, and using the full force of who I am and my experience and my background, and I had a bullseye on my back from day one that I just didn't even understand, and was really surprised by.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, there's been lots of theories bantered about, even by the comms team of our BC Liberals, but I'm on some sort of a bulletin board with a dart being thrown at me at different times, and honestly, I don't totally understand it. It's evidently mostly from the NDP. When you have an NDP strategist as their main quoted person in most of the attack pieces, that's probably evidence of that. But there's also, it comes from friendly fire. It's others using that to their advantage to discredit your voice. But I don't count it as my voice. I count it as the voice of those out there that are contacting me and bringing forward their concerns.
Well, I mean, in terms of your fellow leadership contestants, Kevin is a former MLA and minister. Ellis Ross is a current MLA. Who else is there? Michael Lee is a current MLA. You just last night, the BC Liberals, or the party slash the person, announced that there's a new contender in the race, another man. Who am I missing? And Gavin Dew.
And Val Litwin.
Oh, and Val Litwin. Sorry. Yes. It's my Tuesday morning memory not working for me. So yeah, Val, Gavin, Michael, Kevin, you, and then the newcomer. You're the only woman in the race. So, I mean, that already differentiates you slightly from everyone else. Do you find that people are making a point of sharing that with you and saying that's something that they are happy to see in the leadership race, or is it something that doesn't even really, register?
No, I definitely feel like there are some people who feel like it's an important perspective and an important voice. I would say that my colleagues have been, supportive in terms of like, it's great that you're in the race. It's great that we have your voice. But I wouldn't say that translates always to, to full support in terms of endorsement, et cetera, which I would say is disappointing. It's like, okay, I'm going to just continue on and continue to be who I am and continue to, draw attention to the issues that I think we need to be mindful of. But I think that one of those is that, society is 51% female. We're graduating from university, from post-education, from, postgraduate education, et cetera. And I'm someone with 2 master's degrees, so it's not like I'm a slouch. But, we're graduating over 50%. So 54% is the current statistic on females graduating. But that's not even what gives you the credentials to be in politics, right? It's who you are in your community. And, you look into the organizations and the support groups within your community, and you're going to find even more than 50% female. And yet our caucus is 25% female. And on this leadership run, we're at 14% female.
Yeah.
Like that isn't where, I don't think that's fully representative of who we are as a culture and who we are as British Columbians. And I think that we would definitely want to see that changed.
Agreed. Because I was running down. So, I mean, at one point I could tell you, I could just look at someone and tell you the MLA's name for every single MLA in the province. And I was going this morning and doing a little bit of like research and doing some counting. And I was like, wow, I really have like fallen off the wagon in terms of not knowing people by name, because there are so many new MLAs since I left, which is great. But there are 7 out of 28 women on the BC Liberal side of the House, and then 29 out of 57 on the BC NDP side. And I made a list that was like my women. And then to be fair, my page had a lot of other printing on it, but there were so many names and it just kept on going on. And I had to like start sticking them in places. You're right that the BC Liberal Party currently is not effective in looking like the population of BC. So if you are successful at winning the leadership of the BC Liberal Party, what would you do to change that?
Well, I think that we need to empower society in general to speak in their diversity and to really lay tracks for individuals who are incredible and who are doing a great job in their communities and do have aspirations for politics. I think that, if we look at the NDP, they've done a better job of that. They've done it for 20 years, laying tracks for individuals within their communities. And I think that we need to do the same. We need to empower the grassroots. We need to empower those that already have voice, and then get behind them and do things for them, like anything like social media training, how to, get them involved with other levels of government and other levels of voice, and make them known to their communities as well.
That being said, the BC NDP also has a policy, which, I mean, at the time, so I worked in, I can't remember if it was caucus or government at the time when the BC NDP brought it in, but the BC Liberals labeled it an affirmative action policy. That's obviously not what the NDP has called it, but it's more of an equity and inclusion piece to it, where if a sitting MLA steps down, or a candidate, then they have to broaden the search in terms of who they're looking for to fill that seat. Do you think would you consider something like that if you were the leader of the BC Liberals?
Well, I think that if you look at let's use women because it's something that I'm familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
I think the average time that you have to ask a woman to go into politics is something like 19. For a male or a male counterpart, it might be 3.
Right.
It's you do have to be more intentional. I've not been one that has been super supportive of quota systems. What I do believe in, though, is focus on diversity. So yes, you bring merit forward, but then you look at the candidates and you actually say, okay, well, who is the better representative of this community, and how do we more adequately represent British Columbia as a whole? We need to have that level of diversity on every ballot, on every slate, and right now we don't.
Yeah. It's and I used to be of the mind when I worked in politics that I was opposed to having a policy like the BC NDPs because I saw it as, well, then obviously it's not the best people being put forward, but actually I've come full circle. It is the best people being put forward. It's that that equity piece. It's you've seen the very common diagram. It's like different people standing at a fence, and the fence is the same height, and depending on where they are, they have different circumstances, which makes them potentially not be able to see over top of the fence. And so some people need more help in terms of being able to get that boost so that they're on a level playing field. And so I actually see the BC NDP's policy as doing that. Obviously not everyone agrees with me, and you and I have different positions on it. Which is good, because I mean, that creates better conversation, right? Also, I don't live in BC anymore, and I'm not a BC Liberal member any longer, which is tough for me, but that's another story.
So what I would say to that, and I'll give you an experience from the private sector.
Yeah, please do.
I served on a board for a number of years, and I had the privilege of chairing the nominations committee. And I watched as that nominations committee basically every single year, because there were different people that would be up for re-election, every single year would put forward basically an endorsed candidate slate. And on that endorsed candidate slate, we took a look at all of the different backgrounds. So the diversity was actually very holistically looked at, whether that was educational backgrounds or geographical backgrounds, or whether it was race, whether it was religion, whether it was age, whether it was gender, and or whether it was different experiences that were necessary to really encapsulate this board as a whole. And we looked at who was leaving, we looked at what gaps were needed, we looked at where the organization was going and how we were going to fill those gaps. And then we very intentionally recruited. Like, I remember having some of those conversations and saying, okay, like, and we looked at, within our own scope and who we knew that we could recruit from. But then we even went farther and would hire third-party firms to say, who are some candidates who have incredible merit in these areas, and then anonymize them and take off anything that might, produce a bias within us, and then start to do that process and then interviews, et cetera, in a whole list of different ways. You're right. Sometimes we need to change that step stool, how high it is for that person to actually look over. And I think that's what I was indicating earlier. Doing that intentionally, I have to know that I might have to ask that female candidate 20 times or maybe 21 times to put forward. I might have to, give some social media support or help them understand how they can do it. I might have to actually show up in the riding and say, hey, this person is working hard, and they have a direct line, even though it's an unheld riding, they have a direct line in to their neighboring riding, and that MLA is willing to help. So if you need help, please let us know if you're not hearing from your MLA. Like, there are things that we can do, really simple, really, grassroots types of empowerment that we haven't been doing in the past.
I agree.
We allow the same riding associations to choose the same people. And then in the end, we get something that looks like who we already are. And I would say that the biggest disruptor to that was Christy Clark.
Yes, 100%. Well, and you raise a very good point about the riding associations. Like, if the riding association doesn't change and it's the same group of people for a very long time, then, they obviously they have their own biases and preferences as well. And so that level of politics also has to be revitalized, also has to include new people, also has to, be representative of the community as well. And that's a viewpoint I have is from a political staff as well. It's not just about elected positions. It's also about unelected positions. Sometimes even more so, depending on the power that unelected position or person, the power that they have to do whatever it is they do, can be really limiting in that, they just maintain the status quo as well, which that benefits no one except maybe them.
Agreed. And it takes voices to say things need to be different. And, I think that, you use quota systems, or you use kind of the stick aspect. I don't think it's a stick, but I'm putting it in quotation marks for those who are listening. The stick aspect of it, when you are not getting that happening organically, where you're not seeing that happen. And, I mean, my riding association would be indicative of how I have tried to change it. Right? We do have South Asian representatives. We do have more females. We do have, younger demographic. We pulled on the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, and yes, they do need nudges to say, come and get involved and be excited with this process. But it's also making a very intentional effort as to who we need in order to represent well.
Yeah, I like that you put it that in that way, because often it's because there will always be people who put up their hand first in politics. And traditionally, the people who have been putting up their hands first and putting themselves at the front of the line have been white men. That's very, as controversial as that may be to some people, it is just very true. And so we need to get other people to put up their hands and to get them to the front of the line. It's not because they're not qualified. It's because they've seen traditionally who has been putting up their hand, and that has prevented them from doing that same thing.
Totally. And it's a popularity contest, right?
It is.
It's and there are machines out there that keep churning out the same person.
Well, and politics isn't really, politics likes the way things have been done. It's not the most welcoming of places for anyone who's considered to be an outsider, someone who's considered a disruptor, someone who doesn't play by, the traditional rules of whatever the game is. That really gets the back of the establishment of whatever party, of whatever political system up. Because then they see themselves as in a fight for, keeping things the way they are, because, they don't want to change.
But that's where we lose. And when I say we, I'm talking about we as society.
Mm-hmm.
We lose with that environment. We don't get the best people. We don't get the best ideas. We don't get, someone asked me just the other day, well, Renee, how would you do it different if you were leading or if you were premier? And I said, I would actually have committees that work on different issues that have representation from every single party. And I would make sure that those voices are heard, because, an amendment put forward by another party, wait a second, let's listen to that. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't we go with that amendment? It might make the law better. The way that it's done today, and yes, I only have experience in opposition, but I have grassroots experience on the other side, where we would meet with the ministers on the Premier's Economic Council, and we would literally say, well, you need to change that law this way because it's going to unduly or unfairly affect women, or it's going to unfairly affect a single parent, or it's going to unfairly, affect someone that is, in this particular situation. So we got to do that and watch that they would just change the law, and then forward it would go. But I don't think it has to be that way. I don't think you just have to, push forward a bill, not answer any questions on it, just dogmatically stand and say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and then pass it.
Well, and I mean, I saw a little bit paying attention to what happened in BC in the last legislative session, and there were a lot of things that, weren't maybe given the time, a lot of bills that they should have been. And, when the NDP was in opposition and the BC Liberals did that, that's when they would cry foul. And now it's happening. So, there's always challenges to being in government versus being in opposition and vice versa. It's always interesting when the shoe is on the other foot.
And that's where you need a disruptor. That's where you need someone who has done it differently, who has seen it work differently, and can bring about a positive change, and not just positive change for themselves, positive change for the entire society as a whole.
Well, and I remember listening to an episode of BC Polly Hot Stove with McLean Kay and Jordan Bateman, and it was a while ago, but they were talking about all of the different leadership candidates coming. Jordan was talking about them presenting, or you presenting individually to the Independent Contractors and Business Association, and that when you were presenting to the group, that people, I think he said something to the effect of, that people paid attention, like no one was on their phones, I think is something along the lines to what he said in that episode. And to me, that was really telling. And I think that's because, you do have that significant business experience, and, and specifically to that audience, you have real life experience, which they do as well. And so you're coming from a common place. So you have solutions and understand issues in a way that someone else might not.
Yeah, and I take a pragmatic approach, like what is actually going to work, not what is, what's an ideological, premise to stand upon, or, what can I say that will get me off this question? That was one of the comments that was said during that meeting was, wow, I think you're the first politician to ever answer a question. Mm-hmm. But it's like, well, but that's because I've thought about it, and there is an answer to the question, so it is something that I think we need more of, is just understanding how it's going to actually affect people, and listen to that. So that was high praise from the Jordan.
I thought so. I was like, wow, that is like, that was a standout comment for me. And obviously it stayed with me, because I'm not familiar with everyone that's presently in the race, having been out of BC for so long now. So I've been learning about different people running, and that comment stayed with me in terms of, that was very impressive. So,
thank you.
So let's say you do win the leadership of the BC Liberal Party. What is the first thing that you would do as leader?
So it would be, I would bring the team together. So I think that first and foremost, and when I say team, it's almost the circles, right? Yes, we need the caucus and, the sitting MLAs to come together and to really have those fierce conversations about direction and how we are going to do it. The storming norming stage, right? Where we actually need to create norms of how we're going to treat each other and how we're going to be a team, because I'm a big believer in team, and big believer in support. I have some ideas of how we would reorganize, how we would, everything from tackling QP differently, or question period differently, to how we would really focus on building policy, so that we're not building policy at the 11th hour of an election. We're actually already starting to bleed it into what we're saying and how we're countering the current government. So that's one stage. The second stage is actually rallying all of the different riding associations. Whether held or unheld ridings, we need a rallying cry, almost that Braveheart, like we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this together, and then figuring out what each of them needs. They're not all going to need the same thing, but we need to, because we are a strong but mighty 28, and we're about to have about probably 95 by the time the Electoral Boundaries Commission is done. We're probably going to have 95 riding. That is a huge recruitment effort. It's a huge effort when it comes to riding associations. And so we need to bolster. We need to figure out, where do you need help? Where do you need support? How can we do this? And really get behind our riding associations and get behind their voices, and then do things like have, different events in every single area and every single riding association that really creates the excitement and the voice of where we need to go. And the voice of the unheld ridings is almost, is equally, or if not more important than the voice of the held, because we already have that, somewhat captured in a sitting MLA.
Well,
And then
because the BC Liberals lost so many in the last election. So, I mean, those are unheld, a lot of them are unheld within recent history. So you need those ones, you need them back if you want to form government.
Absolutely. And it's possible. Like, I've heard some of the other candidates are like, well, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. It's somewhat possible. We'll get some back. I'm like, is 2001 that long ago?
Mhm.
Like, I remember when we completely stormed the castle gates and basically took every riding except two. Really, outside of those two, we have held every single riding, and I think we can hold every single riding again. But it's about two things. One is making sure we ask the best questions of government and ask what's on everyone's mind. And then, the second thing is be the government in waiting and show that strength and show that team and show that voice and that, and that willingness to really move forward for the best case for British Columbia.
I know things might change just given the unpredictability of I mean, it's been, we've had COVID, and then also, unfortunately, in the last few weeks in BC, the horrendous devastation of the landslides and flooding. To me, I'm not like, what do you think the ballot question is for the BC Liberal membership in terms of going into the vote in the new year?
So I think the ballot question is twofold. One is, what type of leader do you want? It's less about, all of us are going to say certain things about policy. So 4 of us will land on one side, 3 of us will land on the other. On most issues, or 5 of us will land. So it's not going to be as much about that. It's going to be, do I believe you? Do I feel like you're competent? Do I feel like you're listening? Do I feel like you're warm? Do I feel like you're hearing me? Have I seen your eyeballs? Have I shook your hand? Have I been able to ask you a question? Whether that's on a Zoom call, in an email. Have you been in my riding? Have you been in my area? So it's really about style of leadership. And then, do we want something different, or do we want something the same?
Well, and I mean, it was being now in Alberta and then watching the last election. I have my own ideas and opinions on what happened and things. I
would love to hear them.
we can do a second episode, and you can interview, you can talk to me.
I would love it.
But my top level boil down kind of thing is that British Columbians ultimately decided that what the BC Liberals were pitching isn't what they wanted to buy. And so going into the next election, there needs to be a complete rethink of what was offered before, if you're going to rerun the same campaign from last time, which wasn't successful, or is it going to look completely different? Because I don't think that British Columbians want what the BC Liberals were selling.
No.
And from a business perspective, and as a fellow businesswoman, you don't open a store and then fill it with things that people don't want to buy.
No.
That's not the point, right? And it's the same with a political party, except it's not people coming and doing a transaction. It's, you need to earn their vote. What will get their vote?
Absolutely. And I think that we've been afraid to tackle really difficult issues like childcare, like healthcare, like mental health, because we don't know how to solve it. And that's the part that really excites me. Those are the things that I've been thinking about in some cases for 25 years, like childcare, with that, desperate mom trying to find a childcare option for my young kids, all the way to, whether it was on the Ontario Health Authority Board and looking at mental health, substance use, and homelessness in a very different way, in a very different lens. But I look for solutions. Like, as a business owner, I'm always looking for, how do we solve it? How do we move it forward? How do we change it? Rather than, a bureaucrat or someone who's, really grown up in the political system, who's looking at it from a position of, how do we win points? How do we stave the gap? How do we do the least disruption, but still change things that will get us some headlines? And it's like, that won't save people's lives. And right now, our healthcare system, whether it's reading reports, whether it's reading what's coming out, our healthcare system, people are dying to wait. And
Yeah.
that's just wrong, right? That's just wrong. That's not who we are as Canadians. That's not how the healthcare system was set up. And do we need more money into the system? No, we need more efficiency. We need less top-heavy decision making. I use the NDP decision on the surgical renewal program, $250 million. I couldn't find the money. In estimates, I asked the minister where the money had gone, and he couldn't really tell me where the money had gone, except to say, well, it went to building capacity. Well, the plan was hatched, and the surgeons found out about it a half an hour before the press conference. The nurses found out about 40 minutes before, and the anesthesiologist found out about it about half an hour after. So not one of those three associations of professionals who are involved in delivering surgical care to British Columbians was involved in making the decision on how that surgical renewal program was going to move forward, which is why we did 12,468 less surgeries last year than we did the year before.
Well, I mean, and that's there's so much to dig into, right? And again, it's always easy to say things when you're on the opposition side. And then, who knows, and governments in estimates, and people don't, elected officials don't always share everything, right? Because there might be something that they can't share or won't share for whatever reason. And then it's only, gaming comes to mind in terms of something like that. And maybe, or ICBC would be maybe a better example. And, it's only when you get into the room and, you get to open the books yourself and, see things and then it changes your perspective, and then things change or they don't change. And, it's just also political. But I've really enjoyed talking with you today. It's the first time we've ever chatted. And I've really enjoyed it. And I've really enjoyed seeing you obviously take over Steve's seat, and then, well, it's not Steve's seat, it's Kelowna-Mission, but take over the seat in Kelowna-Mission, and everything you've been doing in your leadership race, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a big shoes to fill. So
literally, he's like a size 13 or something. He literally has really big feet.
Yeah. No, and thank you for what you do. Thank you for how you are bringing forward the voices and really trying to promote what we need to hear. So I much appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, my approach to it is, however, sometimes, obviously different political parties, different political people will have different approaches to doing different things. I see the end result. I want legislatures, I want political staffs, riding associations, boards, agencies, commissions, executives to all look like the populations that they actually represent. And so, will I always agree with how one person does it over another? No, but we all need to be moving toward that same goal of, of progress and change. And, it shouldn't be that, that there is such a lack of diversity and representation in politics anymore. So we just need to keep talking about it.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly. And it definitely helps to have people that have experienced being the only one to try and help someone else not be the only one.
Well, yeah. And I definitely, that's a really, that brings up something else that happened in pre-podcast recording this morning and having a conversation with someone else in politics. There are some experiences that women have, and I think that we go through them alone for the most part. And because there's kind of a cone of silence around some things, and and sharing and being vulnerable can often be seen as a weakness, which it's not. It shouldn't be. Vulnerability is a human emotion. People are human, voters are human. They need to understand that the politicians and people in politics are human too, but we need to do a better job of, I think, supporting one another. And we don't always agree sometimes on the things of the construction of some things, but we understand and support each other as people, and that you're doing the work. You're all doing the work but being there for one another is something I think we need to do a better job of. So anyways, well, I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah. And let me know when you want to run, and
that would require moving back to British Columbia, which is something that I would love to do, but just having opened a store in Calgary, that would make it a little bit more complicated. Plus my husband's industry is very specific to, well, that's not true. He's a mining engineer, so he likes big holes in the ground. And we need to be around those kinds of things so that he can do what he loves to. But anyways, one day, one time, and I hope to meet you in person at some point in BC. So thank you for talking with me today.
No, thank you.
This has been another episode of Elected. Thanks for joining us today. Until next time.